Yo, what's going on, fam? It is a pleasure, and we are back live with the Cannabis Diversity Report. Today we have Janessa Bailey, the culture editor for Leafly, in the building. Janessa, I'm saying this is super dope. You officially make Leafly the first company to ever have two people on here. So, what's up? Come through. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, truly. Um, I am doing great. It's Friday, first of all. We love a Friday, and it's an interesting time in cannabis as usual.
It is. It is. It's always an interesting time in cannabis, and it is a beautiful summer Friday. And you just put out a report that I really think is dope. Highlighting social equity, the different laws, tracking everything that's going on in the markets. For me, as somebody that kind of nerds out on all this type of information, I thought it was super helpful and super useful. So it was dope to see. Talk a little bit about how first before we get into the report though, let's start with you. Talk about your background. How did you get into how did you get in the cannabis industries? I think journalism is especially important. Especially to have a black woman like you helping to share this narrative. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to cannabis, I've recently realized that my first step in my journey was probably that I grew up in a small rural town in Missouri where I was enrolled in a DARE program. So I always consider that step one because I think it's important when you talk about stigma and how we grow up and we learn and we think about weed, cannabis, that you remember these, other programs that might have influenced your thinking growing up. So I really didn't even feel comfortable with cannabis until around my 20s. And that was when I had left Missouri. I moved to Charlotte. And I spent time in Charlotte and was working as a copywriter in a marketing program. This is after I went to journalism school, by the way. That's when I, got my first connect. I really was able to be like, okay, I'm going to experience weed on my terms, nobody else's terms. And then I went to graduate school in Atlanta. I went to Georgia State. But throughout all this time, I was working in marketing, working in higher education. I had a content role in financial technology. And then I got into cannabis and I started out in the medical marijuana industry. And it was very eye-opening to me to see how the regulations there actually impacted people. And that was the first time that I was able to get my feet wet, being able to talk about the science of cannabis and being able to really articulate myself around what is, a very complex plant, honestly. Which is something I value because I'm a writer, so I need to be able to type it out, write it out. That's my lifeblood. And then I moved from medical marijuana to Leafly, which, as we know, is all cannabis all the time. And here at Leafly, I've been able to learn a lot about B2B issues, different business issues that, dispensaries or retailers or cannabis brands might have. And then last year, I had the opportunity to take on a role that allowed me to, express more of my opinions and to really talk about the things that I'm very passionate about as it is concerned with cannabis, which is also having to do with diversity, inequities in the industry. And that is drawn straight from my graduate degree, which is in African American Studies. And so not only am I a Black woman, but I love talking about Black people. And it seemed like time and time again, I was being asked, what are the issues? Why are these issues there, especially within the last year, right? George Floyd was murdered, and we have this huge nationwide reckoning, this huge nationwide response. And I could have done it little by little, article by article, right? As I'm an editor, but instead I was going to say put my pencil to the paper, but I didn't. I put my fingers to the keyboard, and I worked on that paper for several months. Very, very keen on, first and foremost, And then also doing a comparison of states as legal recreational states and how they are doing with their social equity programs. I'm not sure if you're still there to hear. You got the spinning circle. Oh, you're back. Are we frozen? Are you there? I'm still here. I didn't leave.
All right, yeah. I don't know what happened with this internet, man.
It happens all the time.
But tell me
like
about it.
It's a work from home. I don't know. You just gotta roll with it.
Right. Well, you know, that's something we were getting used to with technology and everything like that. But you know, like you were saying, when I before my Wi-Fi didn't want to let me be great.
Okay.
You were talking about how you saw these issues, but then you really took the time to put all that into a report. You know, and really even before that, like you said, you've really been covering this space when it comes to social equity and some of these entrepreneurs. What have you found tends to be consistently, you know, some of the problems or challenges for minorities in the cannabis industry?
Well, through working on projects like Lumen, which I'm not sure if you know about, it's a digital space that I have on our site specifically for Black voices, where I went out and wanted to talk to a lot of different Black cannabis business owners and different people, even in pop culture that we associate with cannabis or support the plant. And I had conversations with, again, these entrepreneurs who were trying to get into the industry, and something that continued to show up was the lack of seed money, a lack of capital. And so I felt as though it was very important to address that, but not just as in venture capital, which is also an issue because Black businesses do get less than 2% of the venture capital funding that's out there, but also that Black people often do not have their own generational wealth that can be poured into their business, help them overcome the obstacles. Throughout the report, we go through and we break down some of the numbers. And starting a cannabis business costs between $100,000 and $500,000. And before I wrote this report, I just remember, you know, hearing about starting a cannabis business and being like, do I know a different Black America? Like, where are we getting this money from? And so that's when I went in, I did the work. I looked at the stats about, you know, the average amount of wealth a Black family holds versus a white family, and started to build that argument. Then we also have the question of healthcare access. There are huge systemic inequities in our healthcare system. They are absolutely everywhere. And in fact, it looks as though, according to a lot of the data, that pretty much anyone who's non-white, or anyone who's not white, pays up to 30% more for their healthcare just due to health inequities over time. So where is that coming from? You know, how does that affect people being able to start businesses, people using medical marijuana? You know, there's a lot of reasons why this industry as it is still in limbo, and it's still halfway underground, halfway, you know, in Amazon carts. And it's important to address those reasons. So it was very, very important to also talk about the healthcare access point of it. And then also we wanted to make sure we mentioned criminal justice, because without addressing the criminalization of people who have used cannabis in the past and people who have been harmed by the war on drugs, then we're really not helping to address any of the previous harm, right? We want, like, people who have been arrested for or have cannabis convictions have lifelong consequences, which, another fun data point, can be up to 30% less of a lifetime wage if you have a cannabis conviction anywhere on your record. So you start to think about how that impacts families generation after generation, you know, especially in our community and other communities of color. We're still trying to get over things that happened in the 70s, the 80s. You know, we are trying our best to prosper, but what I definitely wanted to come through in the report was that there are huge systemic obstacles, and the level of opportunity that so many people get so excited about the potential in cannabis, right? Whether that's the revenue, the health benefits, anything like that, it's not equally accessible to Brown people. And it was important that the report addressed that directly.
Right. And well, another area that I thought was super interesting in the report was you kind of did a ranking of each state and like talked about how equitable the state is overall. What was the methodology that you used to come up with that, and what states were the most equitable and which ones were the least?
Okay, you're going to test my knowledge yet now.
Well, what was the most, like, what's just, it doesn't have to be the most or the least, but just highlight what were some of the good ones and, you know,
so creating the scale, I'll try to give you the brief summary. Creating the scale, I took 8 different equitable strategies and I weighted some of them. And so as we talk about, you know, the ones that stand out, I'll tell you about what we weighted and what we didn't weight. So 2 of the strategies that we really wanted to make sure we showed within our metrics or within our grading, I will say, that were important were mandating automatic expungement for cannabis convictions and establishing an equitable cannabis licensing system. Those 2 are incredibly important strategies because, again, we need to we need to give people who have been harmed by the war on drugs, harmed by outdated drug policy, the chance now to re-enter the world and be treated with fairness, right? And to have all the opportunities that anyone else who enjoys cannabis now enjoys. And then we also need to make sure that we are helping our industry get set up in an equitable way. And that starts with the programs that come out of states. And so states have to keep an eye out for social equity applicants. They have to really get to know what's happened in the legacy market, the existing market in their state, and they need to kind of constantly be on the lookout for ways that they can keep predators, or I should say predatory businesses, away from these, you know, smaller businesses who are just trying to make it, who maybe got, you know, an accelerator grant or, you know, actually took out a little loan to start their business, and give them the best shot that they possibly can get. And so that's why those 2 were weighted a little bit higher in the equity index. That's what we called it. But then we had other strategies that were still very important and still weighted a little more, like safeguarding access for medical patients to be able to get their cannabis, and that is from the distance to the nearest dispensary, to doctors that they trust. And then another huge one, and this will round out the top 4, was about home grow. And gardening is wonderful, and so many people enjoy it. And it seems so silly to me that there is a desire by government entities to, you know, mandate if someone can grow 1 cannabis plant versus 6 versus 12. If nothing else, I wanted to make sure to highlight that the amount of cannabis someone can grow should be able or relatively aligned with the amount they need as their medicine. And so that was why I wanted to make sure and definitely highlight something like home grow, which is important to people all across the country for sure. And so then we had 4 other strategies that I went through, and, you know, state by state, all of the recreational ones, minus Connecticut, because they legalized as this was going to print.
Yeah, so
Yeah, right. I was like, whew, that was a little stressful. I felt kind of bad. There's a few weeks there where so many states were legalizing that it was hard to keep up with. But anywho, so I went through and rated all of the recreational states against this equity score index and in this scoring, and then was able to see how each state did, how each state did comparatively to one another. What was most important was to highlight the amount of opportunity that states could be giving, and to show states who have systemic barriers or policy barriers in place that they could be doing better. And so throughout this ranking, went through and, found some really promising programs happening in a few states. And that includes states like Colorado, that includes California, Illinois, and New York rounds out our top 4. But then we did have states, and I should say states like those 4, they had, if they weren't demonstrating proper strategies, they were at least trying them, which we know that, oftentimes cannabis is trial and error, but you have to keep doing the trials, right? You have to keep trying. And then they also had, they were trying to do a little something with the licenses. They were trying to pull out a little, or a lot even in some cases. Like Colorado got ranked so highly because they just redid
their new program. Yeah.
And if they hadn't done that, then Colorado would have been, ranked much, much lower, but they're actually trying to address it. They've actually, made announcements. They're putting money behind things. They're changing things around. It was also important that as I made this, it wasn't just about states who, barely had plans to do things, but, states that had actually done a few things and put boots to the ground and had really made an effort in different communities. And so a lot of the research of this was, going through the news, like how are businesses in that state actually doing? What are the issues that they're facing? If they passed a bill that said that they were going to help, small minority business owners, are they actually helping? How is that really working? And so, like I said, those 4 states, Colorado, California, Illinois, and New York, did fairly well. But then we did have people at the bottom end of the scale, and those are your Nevadas, unfortunately, your Alaska and Maine, Montana, and we have one more. Check my notes. South Dakota. And they only got a 30 on our side, which isn't great. And that is because they aren't trying to expunge any records. They don't have good licensing programs. They, those states got their points mainly because of they have a medical marijuana program. And also because, what was the other one? Oh, because they allow homegrown. And there's more. Clearly, there's more.
Then you don't got to give away all of it, right? Because people definitely need to go out and read the report. But
right. But it's a long report. But it's a beautiful report. I'm so thankful to have been able to work on it with the entire Leafly team. After I got the words out, then it was great to be able to compare it to Bruce's process that he uses on the jobs report, which I had, been privy to because I was a co-author on the jobs report this year, but to have my own was, an entirely different experience. But to have, Bruce's input and our awesome design team, trying new stuff and doing their best to highlight important information in, an exciting way, I couldn't have asked for, it to come out better. And it feels like such an accomplishment just to have the first one out, truly.
Absolutely. No. And congratulations. That is big, doing having your first like personal report, even being a part of another one is one thing, but having your own is super dope.
Yeah.
And, you're talking about a lot of it, important areas, because even in the job report, you guys highlighted like the lack of like ownership in the industry and, the need for diversity in the industry. And education is so important, for our people to have access to this opportunity. So, what are the things that you think are most important that really are, that people of color need to learn about in order to try to be successful in the industry?
So to be successful in the industry as business owners?
No, I mean really, or even or a journalist, right? Like
Oh, on the
someone wants to
professional
be a
path.
journalist and try to get into the industry. What type of advice would you give them if they're trying to look at coming over from something different?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, really try to make authentic connections with people. What I have learned in this industry is that, I mean, you can be performative or not genuine if you want to, but at some point, this was very pre-pandemic, at some point you might get to smoke with that person. And do you want to really smoke with somebody that like you aren't really feeling with? Like, like it's a great time for coming up with ideas. It's a great time for a lot of fellowship. It's a great time for people to come together and you to learn things about how this industry works. So I would definitely say make authentic connections, keep them, don't be shady. We're not trying to build a shady industry here. Second, I would say know the plant in some way, know the plant intimately in some way. And so that could be because you enjoy consuming it. That could be because you're a science nerd and you love, you just love to look at molecules. Good for you. Good for you. That could be because you think, seeing people like Burner and Snoop are super cool with their brands, and you're like, dang, I want to know everybody who owns a weed brand because I want to make money like that. I want to do this. No matter how you get to know the plant, start digging in. And it's what I think is at this point, what is cool, it's scary, but it's cool, is that we're actually evolving past a lot of, very fundamental ideas. Hopefully, I think I think we're getting to the point where we get THC and CBD. People know those. And so you have to make sure that, I lost my little my point of view or my train of thought a little bit. Make sure that you can always work from a genuine place, I will say. And that's going to come from an intimate knowledge of the plant itself. And I'm going to cut it off there.
No, well, that's a good point. Like
before I forget again.
Yeah, really, I think that's a good point to, if people are genuine and do things, for the love of it, not just, not just because it seems like something seems cool. Because cannabis, again, is, it starts with loving the plant, but it's still a job, a career like anything others. But I think it's important for people to know that, again, whether there's so many different lanes, on here, we get to talk to people that are writers, that are attorneys, that are, doing in all different types of lanes that are out here carving out, success in the industry.
Definitely. And if I had to, now that I think about it, one more point that I would say is talk your ish. Keep talking it until you run into somebody who is ready to hear it, because what I do know is that I have had a very similar mentality to what I do now towards cannabis for a few years since I got into the industry. And it wasn't until I was in a space like Leafly in 2020 where I had the opportunity and the support for somebody to say, no, go ahead and do it. Freak out. Go get on your keyboard and do it. And that felt really, really nice. So yeah, keep talking your stuff and also find work environments that work for you. Just, and that make you feel comfortable to say what you need to say.
Yep. And most definitely. So working at Leafly, since you review cannabis, I'm sure you must have a favorite strain.
I do. Well, first, I lean towards anything with limonene in it. I love lemon, so I love citrusy flavors. I'm always going to go and get a tangy anything. If it has tangy in it, sour tangy, I would like it. But also right now, I'm enjoying some Skywalker OG, and I think I have a little bit of Chem Dog in there. enjoy my cannabis. And it depends on what mood I'm in. And so not so much a favorite strain as strains that I will return back to because I remember that I really enjoy them. While I have that little, that little A, I did this and that with my friend. I wrote this poem, like I had a good time. And so a lot of it is about the experience that I have with the strain and how it really makes me feel because cannabis for me is very much about self-care. It's very much about, feeling comfortable, feeling relaxed. I wrote a 35-page paper, so you might be able to imagine I have a lot of thoughts. Sure.
That's a lot of thoughts, 35 pages. And it wasn't like the big print double spaced or nothing either. That was a real
report. And so sometimes I just need to dial that down a little bit. I just need to dial it down. But then, Leafly's always there for me to turn it back up however much I need to. And the cool thing about being culture editor is that not only do I get to work on projects like Seeds of Change and Lumen, but also at any point in time, I could be interviewing somebody who makes artisanal bongs. I could be learning about what's happening with cannabis in Mexico. I could be making a list of Etsy tchotchkes and pipes because that's also what I get to do in my job. So it's nice to be able to go back and forth between some high pressure, really serious information to, stuff that's a little lighter and stuff is stoners still need. I like being able to go back and forth.
And who are some folks that you've had some of the favorite folks that you've had the opportunity to interview in the industry that people should maybe go follow and, check out?
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to Matt Barnes. I've talked to him a couple times, and he's just a cool dude. And he's not afraid to talk about his past in athletics. I think, this is definitely not something I'm going into today. I think that athletes' use of cannabis is a good thing. I'll leave it there.
That's the next report, huh?
Yeah. Well, no. Oh my gosh. Although I wish Sha'Carri call me. But Matt Barnes is definitely someone that I enjoy talking to. Someone that has held me down since I got to Seattle and helped me learn about that scene up there, because that was really the first time I got to dabble in weed, recreationally for a long amount of time. Was just going to the dispensary and get whatever I want, smell it. There's so many different weed experiences across the nation that it was really nice to learn about a story from Joy Hollingsworth. She's one of my good friends. She's up in Seattle, the Seattle area, and she had a real family story that was at the base of their business and it continues to be at the base of their business. And sometimes I, see cannabis businesses trying to find their strength or their what sets them apart from other people. And Hollingsworth Cannabis Cannabis Company is always going to stand out to me because it comes from this very deep, personal connection that family has with cannabis through generations. And so it's really nice to talk to Joy about, being a Black woman in this industry and what's going on, because it's not the easiest.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest.
Not a lot of Black women and Black people in general. So
yeah, and then I'm also always going to give it up for Cannaclusive. They've provided us with, one, they gather their own data and thankfully make it public, for other people to be able to use, but also their Instagram is always on point. They're always, I wouldn't say I'm an internet creep, but I look on the internet a lot more than I post on the internet. And so I always love seeing Cannaclusive stuff show up because they keep it real, they keep it quick, they keep it colorful, and they keep you up to date about what's going on, which can be hard. It can be hard to, unless you're bookmark a site like Leafly and check it every day. It can be very hard to keep up with everything that goes on in this industry, or even figure out how you feel about everything that goes on in this industry. And Can Inclusive really helps me do that too.
Yeah, definitely shout out to Can Inclusive, Mary, and all the ladies over there.
And Arlene.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ned, well, definitely. So where can people find out? Where can people go download the report, read the report, and follow all the other stuff that you're writing about?
Well, you can go to leafly.com, of course, and you can go to leafly.com/learn/social impact. And you will get to see some of the great things that we have been working on. Again, over the last year, we've been able to start coming out with, a video that is really awesome that explains the differences between, expungement and decriminalization and different terms like that. The difference between things like equity and equality. And I believe the report should be on there, but you can also go to leafly.com/learn/social justice and find it there too. These are different pages that, as an editor, I have the privilege of being able to kind of monitor myself, put together myself, work with our different partners to put content up there. So either one of those pages, you can definitely find my work, the report itself. But other than that, I put something out on the .com every once in a while under my name, but also it is a huge part of my job to make sure that I am publishing the voices of my freelancers and to make sure that I am highlighting a lot of different perspectives all across the country and making sure that cannabis consumers really feel seen and that they feel understood. And so if you don't always see me publishing the articles, it's because I'm facilitating that process and making sure that we do try to include as many different voices as we possibly can on our website and provide an accurate representation of the millions of people who love weed.
So that is so important. That's an important job, like you said, really, like you said, trying to make sure that you're giving a voice to everybody, diverse set of people. Super important, educating people, especially the topics you're talking about, Janessa. Super dope. Glad we got to link up today. We got to do it. Hopefully soon. These conferences and everything are opening back up.
Yes.
When there's no COVID, maybe someday people will blaze together again, or at least side by side. You know what I mean?
Right. Or I'm just starting to think that maybe everybody just needs to roll their own, and if we sit in a circle 6 feet apart, then we're all just talking to each other and smoking our own. Maybe that'll be the next step. I don't know.
Right. Well, all right. Well, it was dope catching up with you today, and we'll link up again soon.
Thanks for having me. I hope to be back, and I hope you have a good weekend.
All right, homie.
Bye.